have studied antiquity and come up with ancient secrets for using sound and music to transform your life. We're almost vulnerable in a way because we don't really understand the implications of how sound and music affects us. So when we go to the grocery store or past power line or have our cell phones in our pockets, we have all these little frequencies that radiate out and interact with us. For example, like little neurotransmitters communicate via little frequencies. Now, we're not going to hear them in our ears, but still, there's all these little frequency systems. We often don't understand the power of sound and music because we're just kind of randomly, aimlessly, we go around and listen to what we like. We think of music as just entertainment. And so we can go and listen to some music that's helpful, you listen to other music that isn't. You go listen, be exposed to computers and cell phones or microwaves, and they can influence your frequencies as well. And so it's like we go through our day, and we have a plus here in music and a minus here and a plus here, and so we don't see a whole lot of results all the time because we're kind of canceling out, if you will. Whereas if you begin to understand how to use frequencies, it's the most incredibly powerful force. I believe the reason why it's so powerful is it's science, in that if you can easily come up with the frequencies of your bones, your tissues, your thoughts, your brain waves. We know all these things. Emotions are a certain set of frequencies. And when you look at the sound waves, they're kind of like right in the middle of all those frequencies. So they tend to impact us powerfully simply because they're close by. That's all. Whereas I'm going to talk about the way that information is communicated in frequencies. Science, just simple little science from 4th grade. It's octave resonance. And what that is that if you match a frequency in close proximity, there's a transfer of energy. For example, I have a violin right here, we'll just pretend, and I'm going to pluck the G string. Maybe I should use that one. Don't want to break my G string. Sorry. But anyway, you don't pluck this G string, and if you pluck this one will play. Hi, come on in, thank you. Yeah, I see. And we're talking about, for those who just came in, about frequencies and how we communicate information with frequency. So we're talking about how information is communicated in frequencies, and we're talking about the theory of octave resonance. And we just talked about how you can play a G over on a violin here, and it will make the G over here sound. Another example would be like in Shrek, when the pretty little girl sings, and she sings a certain note, and she has a glass, and it shatters. That's because she's singing the resonant frequency of the glass, and energy transfers. In fact, so much energy transfers that it explodes. So it's a very powerful tool to get communication through different frequencies. In other words, the color C is a red. So I can get the frequency of red, or I can listen to C. It's kind of the same thing because there's an information exchange. And I'm going to talk about how communication and frequencies in our bodies work. And I think the best way is to explain that there's this little machine called a fast Fourier transform. It was made by Joseph Fourier, and it's a parallel to a crystal, and you see light coming in the crystal, and then you see a rainbow behind it. We've all seen that, right? It's like the crystal takes light and it breaks it into its component colors. Well, a fast Fourier transform is the same thing with sound. You can take the sound of your voice and speak into it, and it transforms into all these little tiny pitches. You can get some on the internet, and I'll talk to that either free, some of them. And you can look at all these component pitches. And your brain speaks the language of mathematics, and it averages them. So we hear a sound, but really the voice is composed of many things. The Krebs cycle of digestion, you know, we're changing chemicals, we're moving it to different places in the body, we're squeezing, we're pulsing. All that stuff makes little tiny sounds. And so there's all those frequencies in our bodies. You can look at a fast Fourier transform and pick out the Krebs cycle of digestion and see whether or not it's working properly and whether or not it's in tune. So your body speaks the language of frequency, which is really mathematics. And the way that mathematics is converted to music is this. It's so simple. Let's say you have a second and you have one sound wave, that's one. 1 second, you have 2 sound waves, that's 2. 1 second, you have 3 sound waves, that's 3. So by using the hertz or the cycles per second, they're the same thing, you can actually put math to music. And that makes it quite precise, quite precise. Okay. One other thing I just wanted to explain was that within your body, actually, I've explained it as simply so it's somewhat clear, but it does get a little bit more complex in that your brain hemispheres process frequencies differently. We all know, nerdy people, I'm one of them, I can get in my left brain and it's a whole different feeling and an energy. And when I process frequencies in an inverse manner when I'm in my left brain and when I'm kind of my airy-fairy right brain. And in fact, they're inverse proportions. So sometimes, depending on what mood you're in or what hemisphere of your brain you're in, you're thinking in one hemisphere versus the other. Interestingly enough, in the sidebar here, the ancient Atlanteans used to test people for right and left brain and assign them medicine different. People in the right brain would use more homeopathic treatment, and people in the left brain would use more allopathic or chemicals like we do, or herbs or something like that. And they were very wise, because that's true, that works. Okay, the other thing I'm going to say about frequencies, I'm just giving you like a little foundation before we go on. One more foundational thing, and that is that the ancient people used to make a circle, and they would assign many things to the circle, like the zodiac. You have 12 signs. They would put within an octave in music, there's 12 half tones. So in the same circle, they would assign half tones, and then I'm a G sharp because I'm a Capricorn, and so they would assign frequencies and notes and note patterns to the astrological signs. You can also assign color to this same wheel. And a traditional color chart usually has 12 different little segments. So, and I'm explaining this because some of the concepts in music are a little easier to understand in colors. And color is just an octave of music. Because light is a certain amount of frequencies per second. If you keep having it, which makes an octave, you get down into the sound range. So if you look at a wheel, whether it be colors or tones or whatever, or even an astrological chart, you'll find that something directly across the wheel balance each other out. For example, right across the chart on a color wheel is the complementary color. Red balances green. So if you have too much red frequency, green kind of undoes it. Let me see other ways to say it. If in infants who have neonatal jaundice, our physicians will put them under a violet light, and that's to get the yellow bilirubin going into their system. So they're actually using color therapy. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Rife technology. He was a doctor in about, 1920s, who was reportedly curing 800 out of 800 cases in the book I read. And he sells Rife frequency machines. They're primarily machines that undo diseases, flus, and bad things that we get. And he's using this color wheel idea. It's like if he finds the frequency of a virus, then he'll put it on a color wheel, go right across the chart, and he'll come up with the antidote. And the whole Rife technology system, and I use it. I have in here frequencies for the swine flu. It just undoes it, because you're just using this canceling effect. Because if you think if we're all energy, we're all waves, right? And you know, like from 4th grade science class, how you have one wave and then you have one down here. If they coincide, they cancel each other out. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on with complementary colors. They're balancing. That's why we like them together, why they look together. They're kind of like a pair. Okay, that's your foundational course. And then I wanted to cover all this stuff. I said my little thing. Okay, health. You can use frequencies to diagnose and to support your body to overcome most type of frequencies. I would recommend going to Shari Edwards, or she has many different websites. But if you just type in Shari, Sharry, she has this wonderful healing system using the fast Fourier transforms, where she breaks your voice into component pitches, and just all these databases. So if you have cancer, she can calculate which frequencies are out of balance and start giving you antidotes. And she's been doing it for 30 years. She's very good. She also has a free program called the Nano Voice, and it's at nanovoice.org. And as I said, everything is based on octaves. The electromagnetic spectrum, where you have 1 to 2 cycles per second, is magnetic frequencies. And to get an octave, you double those numbers. So 2 to 4, you're into the electric range. You can go up, and you've seen it in science where they show you, here's the hearing range, here's infrared, here's TV, here's radio. You've seen those charts of the frequencies. The frequencies are just getting faster and faster as you move along the electromagnetic spectrum. And and I already talked about octave resonance. So you understand that thoughts are correlated to emotions because they're octaves of each other, and emotions are correlated to different tissues. And another octave up might be your bone. And that's why there's correlations between feelings and health. Like if I get this tight feeling in my gut, I might get an ulcer. Or because there's a relationship between this muscle and the feeling of worry. And so then there's many ways, of course, I can heal myself. I could heal myself with the right tones, which is the most powerful, but in a subtle way, I'm also going to heal myself by the right color that I wear close to my skin and other types of things. Okay, Shari has this free nanovoice.org that will trigger every emotion that you're feeling at any given point in time. We think that we are aware of our emotions, and I tell you we're not. Because our brain, it's like in a computer. You have one screen up at the time, and you can have all these other things running. You can be doing other things like cleaning this or cleaning that. But you're just paying attention to one screen. That's kind of how our bodies work. We're thinking about doing this math problem, and meanwhile, underground in our subconscious mind, those brain frequencies are going to have octaves in our emotions, and we're going to be feeling emotions. So we feel emotions all the time, but many times they're in our subconscious and we're not aware of them. That's why all the ancient people say it's so difficult to know yourself, because half of it's underground. It's in our subconscious mind. She offers this free Nano Voice program, which you can use a fast Fourier transform and break your voice into pitches, and you can see where you're high, where you're low. And to be healthy, you'd like a nice balance, so you can chant the tones that are going to be needed for your health or your emotional balance at a time. She uses it as a personality profiler, so you can see what your personalities are and so forth. And anyway, that's that. So I'm just going to talk about different benefits from sound. On one of my CDs, my Stardust CD, I kind of go into health in a backwards way. The periodic chart of elements, if you remember, it's got different rows, and each row has like a family or related types of elements, like your metals or something like that. They're octaves, and they're grouped in 7, like the 7 notes of our scale. And when the electron is filled, you go up an octave. So the periodic chart of elements is very musical. And you can transpose any element into its frequency. So I have in my Stardust one because it like being stardust. That's all the intelligence that went into that. But this theme is stardust. So, and stars are made out of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and that's in our body too. So I put the frequencies of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen in that CD. What I found from reading a lot of physics was that many of the frequencies that we need are not loud. They're quite soft. One of the most powerful frequencies are little tiny ones coming in from space. NASA records them. You can purchase them all from Motorola. They're little, we probably don't hear them, but as I'm assuming here, as the planets move, there's got to be some type of wave, because the frequencies do come in, they change per day. And, you know, it's like, just think of yourself as a big harp, and these little frequencies come in and they travel on the paraneural tissues surrounding your nerves. It's an analog transfer system. It's a very powerful system of transfer of information. That's why astrology has something to it. And so does medical astrology. It's the same thing. It's like, if you can think of, you know, like we're a harp or a piano or something like that, these little frequencies come in and they play us. And they give us a opportunity to master matter. In other words, you know, when we get shit, I don't know, you know, having troubles and problems and things to overcome. But just like, you know, when you're muscle building, you have to overcome resistance to build that muscle, and so it is with our thinking patterns, and so it is with our emotions. And so we get these little frequencies that come in that challenge us, and they allow us just little bit by little bit per day to grow and to be stronger. So it can be seen as a very good thing sometimes, depending on what perspective you have. It can also be seen as challenges. And the ancient Chinese, where I got this idea from, they used to calculate the astrology information and get the frequencies of the planets, and they would play them for healing and balancing. And I have them in my Stardust CD. I think we're listening to it. And so, and they're very subtle. They're in little tuning forms in the back, but it's kind of like rebooting your system. Shari Edwards, who I said had that wonderful healing system, she's found that like 80% of the people's illnesses relate back to the harmonic series of the tones from their astrological sign. So that's very interesting. And then, let me see. Now I read this in the ancient Greek and Kabbalah times, though I think these people might have learned it from earlier civilizations. But the ancient people used to get closer to God by listening to patterns found in nature. And again, anything that's numbers can convert to music, as I explained earlier. So the Fibonacci series of numbers, which is found in the stars all over our bodies, and we're really hardwired to like that pattern of numbers. I read a study where they showed a whole pile of people, they drew pictures of people, and they would map out their face on the Fibonacci spiral so that it was in tune with those ratios. And then they had some that were not according to those ratios. And everybody thought that the people who were beautiful were the ones that matched the ratio. And if they thought someone was not pleasant looking, it did match the Fibonacci series of numbers. I take from that, we're kind of hardwired to like that. The Tibetan monks would listen to harmonics, incredible numbers. Again, they're trying to get closer to God because it's a spiral, and a lot of the ancient traditions believes it takes you up to God. We don't hear it in our music systems today because we have equal temperament tuning, which makes it easy for musicians to transpose, but you know, it's like a circle. Or perhaps spiritually speaking, it's a dog chasing its tail. So anyway, I put the Fibonacci series of numbers into my Paint Your Soul CD. And I also put in there, this isn't mine, I read this again, but someone else found in the Old Testament, there was numbers encoded. The Solfeggio tones, like there's people down there, Soma Energetics, that they do healing, and whole healing school on 6 tones. They do wonderful things. It was found encoded in the Bible, and they all have wonderful gifts. And that's in my Paint Your Soul. The ancient Chinese had another technique for increasing their spirituality and psychic abilities by music. They would listen to incredible subtleties, and it kind of blows my mind when I read this stuff. Like I'm a violinist, and you know, when you kind of have that E kind of wobble sound, it's called a vibrato, and that's all you do when you learn. You just shake your hair. That's as sophisticated as Western music gets. The ancient Chinese would give you like about 26 set of instructions on what to do in 1 second with a vibrato. You know, it's louder, it's softer, it's narrow, it's this, hold this and that, and all within the span of a second. And I'm like, you know, how could anybody process that much? But they were much more attuned to subtleties, and their audience was more attuned to subtleties. And in some of the ancient tribes, they improved their listening capacity simply by paying attention, becoming attuned to finer and finer things. And what they're doing is they're raising their spirituality. They're getting closer to God. They're increasing their psychic abilities just by doing that. Kind of cool. Okay. Other benefits from music. I'm going to talk about the Bach flower remedies. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but basically Edward Bach was a man, a doctor, in the early 1900s, and he was also an intuitive. Went to, I believe it was South America, so that the indigenous tribes did not treat illnesses on a chemical basis, but on an emotional basis. In other words, instead of taking medicine for an ulcer, they would stop worrying. And so they believed they were going more at the root cause of illness. And what they did was they had a process. They would take little flowers and they put them in water, and then water has special abilities to transfer information, which our physics has proven. And then they would assume that different flowers feel different. A rose is beauty, a daisy is more cheerful. And so that they would ingest flower water or ingest flower emotions like we take drugs. And anyway, that's the basis for all the little jars and the vials and the remedies and things that you get. So I believe that the biggest problem in this age is our emotions, that we deny them as a society and we don't control them. So I did 2 sets of music. I did my flower music on the Bach flower remedies because I wanted to heal people's emotions. And so I found 2 ways to do that. One was if you, like I said, the periodic chart of elements, you can come up with a frequency for everything. So you can come up with a frequency for a flower. And if you, for example, listen to the frequency of niacin, your face flushes. If you take a pill, your face flushes. So listening to the frequency, providing you account for brain dominance and a few other little details, is the same as taking the medicine, because your brain's language is math, and it gets math through frequencies. So basically, listening to those Bach flower remedies is the same as taking the Bible. And then what I found, and this is just more me, I guess, I just worked in a nursing home for a while, and I used to play violin for my audience, which could never run away because they were all in wheelchairs, and they were very captive. And you know, I played for them for like 6 months. They're all capable of speaking. No one spoke to me. They kind of, you know, sat there. And after about 6 months, I played a lot of whiny, piney, sad stuff. And I found that after 6 months, they started to talk to me. I thought maybe they were getting used to me. But after about 9 months, they started talking to one another. And I guess I realized that sometimes you need to give your sorrow its due to release it. And that it just doesn't come out easily. Sometimes you have to feel your pain. And I know we all say, oh, that doesn't bother me. I say that lots of times. Oh, no problem. Is it a problem? Yeah, it's a problem. It bothers me. And if I go to nanovoice.org and use my little Nano Voice program, I will see, yes, it did bother me. I can see it right there. I can see the register that, yes, that did. But I didn't allow my conscious mind to think that that bothered me. And so we store baggage. You know, we all do. And after you've been hurt a lot, then you don't want somebody close, and you say, oh, it's no problem. But there is a problem. The problem is that you don't want them to hurt again because you've got all this baggage. So in the flower music, I did the, like, one flower is agrimony. It's a flower where it's like pretend nice to real nice. And this is a terrible admission, but that's a good flower for me. I hate to think of myself as being pretend nice and insincere, but I am kind of a pleaser, and I really like to please people, and it's really easy for me to say something nice whether I mean it or not. And I think a lot of people are like that. It's known as being polite. It's known as being a salesman. The customer's always right. Same thing. And I'm not even aware of it when I'm doing it. So what I did in the music was I did a beautiful melody, and then I just took it out of tune in the last second. So it's pretty butt. And I don't mind a pretty butt until I hear the tune stuff. It's such a stark contrast, and that enabled me to be more conscious of when I go into that mode. I don't know how to explain that, but it helped me not only to be more sincere and be more honest, even if it's not pleasant to hear, but it helped me to release it. And you can kind of feel the negative things as they go out. And then I go into the positive end of the music and fill on that. Okay, I've got more gifts in music. Energy. You can use music to increase your energy. And let me just give you a little example here. I'm going to play a CD. Okay. Back to 4th grade science class. Remember when you have one wave, and if another wave comes, and they overlap at the same time, the waves get twice as big. If you have one wave that's high and one that's low, and they overlap at the same time, they cancel each other out. And I told you that was the basis for the right technology that gets rid of many negative illnesses. So another scientific phenomenon about music and sound is that sound is not one clear point, although we think it is. Our ears just don't discriminate. There's a thing called harmonics, and I believe Pythagoras was famous for documenting them, though I read about them in 6,000 years before Christ in the Babylon culture. But what it is, it's science, it can be proved, is that when you make a sound, there's like little echoes. That's why when you're in a church, you can hear the reverberation. Listen carefully, and it goes up in pitch. It goes up in pitch in a pattern. The first pattern, and it kind of correlates the Fibonacci series of numbers. It's this pattern that we seem to like. It's a pattern that Shari Edwards uses a lot in her healing. But the first echo is an octave. The second one is 5 notes apart. The second one is 4, and it has this numerical pattern. It's called harmonics anyway. It happens every time it's science. Now, and so you can have, the reason why different instruments sound different, like a clarinet can play a C and a piano can sound a C, we can tell the difference that one's from a different instrument. That's because this harmonic pattern, this vibratory pattern that happens every time, in different instruments, some of the harmonics have more energy than others. So like maybe the third vibration in a clarinet gets most of the energy, whereas in a flute, most of it stays at the first vibration. And keeping that in mind, you can kind of play games with harmonics. And that's what's going on here. What's going on here is that he's taking the harmonic pattern, happens every time with 2 tones, and he's mapping it out. And then he's taking all the other notes that he can imagine, and he's matching them, how the harmonics are going to match up so that 2 waves combine and you get twice as much energy. And this is simply 2 notes. He's just taking like a little after. This is Harold Moses. You can get his stuff just by typing his name on the internet. I'm forgetting the name of his website, but anyway, it's in my book. But he's taking 2 notes, he's using the harmonics, he's matching them up so that it just happens that they coincide and they build energy. Okay? Can you feel it? See, I always feel like someone took the plug out when they turned that off. Yeah, exactly. That's just physics. Just physics. Do you want energy? I'll turn it back up. And you can also do it, the reason why in the ancient mystery schools this sound stuff was kept secret was because they believed that sound would control populations and cultures and civilizations. The ancient Chinese would keep their civilizations in tune so that they would not have inner fighting amongst them. They would do that by controlling all the frequencies that they heard, because their frequencies is going to trigger certain thoughts and emotions. So they're controlling their people. The other reason is that sound and music can be a blessing, and I see it as a blessing, and I'm dedicated to bringing those blessings forth. But it's really a neutral thing. It can be used to harm equally as well. You can use sound for weapons. Gavron was a French scientist right after World War II, and just, I don't know, for curiosity, built a 6-foot police whistle, and when it went off, he was not in the room, but a technician was, who immediately died. And upon autopsy, they found all his organs jellied. So you can use sound as a weapon, and the reverse technology of this is that you could come up with sounds that would disable your opponents. And that also equates back to the martial arts with the Chinese. If you ever notice when, the karate guys, they always go, "Ah," before they chop somebody. Well, they're actually using a tone to disable them before they get in for the blow. They're taking care of their business before they even strike. They're doing it sonically. Okay. My next CD, I'm doing this. I don't have it out. I will have it out in the spring, but I'm getting into tones and euphony, because as we age, we get out of tune, and different processes get a little bit off. Like I'm getting into like the telomere chromosomes, and they affect your aging, and you can just come up with a frequency. So you can use frequencies for regenerative types of things. Sherry Edwards has, in many cases, regenerated nerves and bones and things that the physician said wouldn't grow. She's doing it in tones. They're very powerful. I'm going to talk about astrology and tones. When you'll find, you could use actually tones and music almost like a dating service. Remember I told you, we talked about that circle and how you can assign the 12 tones in a musical system on that circle. And that the ancient Chinese did that. They also assigned the astrological signs so that they would come up with the frequency for your astrological sign. Now, depending on your life path, you can vary like a half tone off. Like if you learn the lessons, you can go a half tone, but you're not going to go far off your frequency. Unless, of course, you're using your other brain, then you skip to the note, which is the inverse of it, or a full complementary color of it, if that imagery is easier to understand. And so what you'll find in most relationships, that people who are attracted together are they're complementary colors, or they're tones that balance and harmonize one another. And, when you've learned to master and harmonize the things, sometimes then you're ready to move on in a relationship and you need a new tone. You can use tone and music for dating. You can also use music for intelligence. Our brain waves are all frequencies. And our scientists today, they put the brain waves like in a box, out at delta, beta, alpha, and so forth. And they say there's 4. But I think they really get a whole lot further if they got rid of the box and they can keep what they have, but just put it in a circle. Because frequencies are all the same, and they have octaves. And so if you put the brainwaves in a circle, you can find that certain thoughts undo other thoughts. And I'm sure this is part of the reason why the ancient mystery schools, they were so secretive about this music, because you can use some type of mind control frequencies. Because you can match the frequencies of thoughts. they have a technology, I saw it first with the Tibetan monks, where you can use frequencies to open up your left and your right brains. Your left and your right brains, as we said, operate different. They process frequencies different. They also talk to one another. And if you have headphones or sound, the Tibetan monks did it with these little tiny tingshols. They put it real close to your ears. And if you hear tones that are fairly close together, like a bum, bum, just close, and you have headphones, your brain is going to average them. So let's say we have 100 cycles per second in this ear, and I have 200 cycles per second in this ear. I will literally hear 150. I will not hear 100. I will not hear 200. I'm going to hear 150, which is kind of unimportant. But the thing about it is the way that I got to hear that was that this part of the brain and this part of the brain opened up communications and did the math. And so what I did was I just produced a whole brain functioning, which is what most of our geniuses operate under. And you can listen to these little tones. And you know, it creates a certain synergy between the two halves of your brain. They also use that technology to like dial up a brainwave. You can, if you have troubles going to sleep, for example, you can listen to those two different tones. It's called binaural beats is the name they give it, but it's the two little tones and the fact that your brain will average them. You can do that so that your brain's going to hear a very low frequency, like meaning deep, and not many cycles per second. And while you do that, brain frequencies copy each other. So if you listen to that after a while, your brain wave is going to start to match it. And so you can go down into a very, very deep meditative state very quickly. And in like just a minute or two. So you can literally go in and you can say, I want this hertz or this hertz of brainwave frequencies. While you're at some of those low delta frequency waves, it's when you're in the deep cycle of your sleep is when you create them naturally, and you'll find that your body repairs. And it produces a lot of very helpful chemicals like endomorphins and HGC and DHEA, some of the chemicals that are not chemical supplements that we buy that are fairly pricey. Your body creates them, particularly when you're in a delta brainwave. You can dial them up and do them during the day, and you get all those benefits. You can also use it to kind of take you down and get some power sleep, something like that. There's been research that shows that psychic phenomena is usually a person's ability to control a very precise frequency. Like if I'm going to remote view, I go to, and I'm making this up because I don't know, but let's say I go to 18.6. And any time I go to that frequency and I can master or maintain that frequency, then I can remote view. So when you're doing these psychic phenomena, you're learning to control and go to the same state to do it over and over and over again. You're creating the same types of brain waves. You can dial them in with sound. You use this binaural beat technique. That's the one of your brain's averaging the frequencies, and you make the so when you're going to have the two numbers that are be averaged, you just pick a very small number, and that's going to be probably a low delta one, and you can just go in there and pick what frequency you want, and then you get all these health benefits too. Kind of cool. How about before I go on to anything else, let me open up for questions. Anybody got it?
When we talk about waves, sound transmission, they do that in the service with the lines that wrapped around the subway called burning, and that passes, they move that many forces around the steel structure. Also, when you talk about these vibrations, I think the military tried this back in the 20s. With human beings trying to transport a vessel from one place to another frequency.
Yes.
It basically backfired in a lot.
Yes, I've read about that.
It's called Philadelphia.
Yes.
So this is really, I have never heard this before, but amazing. We have a Tibetan wall that we draw sound frequency from it, and it's very, I won't say uncanny, it's very canny in the way it works. It's just beautiful. Because you just feel this thing coming out of the air. And also, we were talking about vibration. I think we as humans have a course of vibration, and for the purpose of healing. And I tried, it could be just maybe a thing of my imagination, but when I was out in the pasture one day, I knew the one voice would have the second problems with the slave. And I had at least 85 feet away. And by getting the feeling of spiritual, it's sort of like when you're going to the if you keep this up, you can feel pressure between your hands. Well, I tried that at a distance just for a joke, right? And of course, I was pointing to the wrong horse, which doesn't happen with that lady. She turned her head and looked right at me. I said, "Oh, that's Sean, it's got the wrong one, better go to Sonny." And then like that, and then we finally turned it in. But that amazed me. I did something on the fly, not knowing anything, just for a joke. And that sensation came through, so I'll tell you what, I've been coming here a couple of years now, and this is truly, truly amazing. Because, you know, you talk about remedies, stitchers that we take, controlling neuro cells, where you go to a psychic and they say, "Well, yeah, you got a stomach problem, but you won't die from it, but you better get it taken care of." No limiting to this. You could destroy a building with this.
Absolutely. And in fact, if I could comment, the Navy recently, at least, I haven't read any Navy documents, but I read that it was a couple of years ago, they were doing the frequencies, loud frequencies underwater, and there was something like 69 whales beached right afterwards. They blew their brains up with the frequencies. And one other comment on the time about the Philadelphia, I don't know if you're all aware about the Philadelphia ship thing, but I won't get into that for time, but I will just say this. The ancients equated time as a force or an energy like gravity, and they equated it to the harmonic cycle. For example, remember I told you about with the harmonic, you have these different 16 notes that kind of like after vibes. Well, there's a pattern. Happens every time, and after 16 you get back to the beginning, and but you get back to the beginning and you're off just a little bit, so it's a spiral. It's not a circle. It matched it would be like concentric circles if you graph this map, but it's a spiral, and what it's off is called the Pythagorean coma. Well, the year or time is off a little bit too. It's not 365 days. It's 364 and 23 and some change. And if you look at the math of what our time is off, and if you look at the math of what our frequencies are off, they're the same. And for that reason, and how these ancient people knew this, I don't know, they believed that time and music were parallel energies. And they would use time traveling, they would use music. Like people talk about Merkabalas, they can be done with music. But I know, like I do past life regressions, and it's so easy with music. I mean, it's just so much more powerful because it's a similar energy. You can kind of ride the wave. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a way to choose the frequency that is what an individual person would need to heal an individual?
Yes, as I said earlier, that's okay. The nanavoice.org, get on and go Shari Edwards' program. She has this little program where it will take your voice into component pitches, and it will graph the different component pitches in your voice, and it'll show what's absent. And a fabulous practice is to take your absent notes, get a piano or a tuning, something to match them, sing the notes that you're missing. It can heal you on multiple levels, emotionally, physically, mentally. Any other questions?
Have you, when you're talking about the levels of the brain, the delta, alpha, what about gamma? I've heard about that. Remember that?
Yeah, I've heard that there are frequencies like above and below the ones that our scientists talk about. There's gamma, and then there's another name, I think it's epsilon, on the other end. And what's interesting is that, so the clarify again, the gamma, or one of them is a little bit faster than the scientists we have on our four chart of four core categories. One's a little slower. And they're extraordinary states. And whenever you're in either one of them, your experiences are the same. So I would suggest that they're like an octave. And it's kind of like a very high state, like when you're in them, you are very psychic and very centered and so forth. But you get the exact same experience whether you go high or low. That helps. Okay. Yes.
What book would you recommend as a basic primer on all this stuff? Just,
Oh, you're so
real
good.
novice.
I wrote a book. Gosh, I mean, you think I'm crazy or something. I wrote a book, and it's my first, but I have a second one coming out in a month or so. But this one pretty much goes through ancient masters and some modern scientists, and it goes through the different methods to heal yourself, and it's like brainwaves, emotions, energy. I try to hit them all, astrology, and so forth. Any other questions? Oh, you're so kind. 723. Yes.
How did you get started in this?
Well, I'm a musician. I've been a musician since I've been 5, and I channel, so I channel music too. It's like cosmic plagiarism, like cheating. I don't know. Just give it to me. So I've always been like really excited about music, and I'm a geek, and I read antiquity for about 20 years. And I learned from the ancient societies, they used this knowledge plainly. Music is not like today. In the past systems, it wasn't the same, always same distance between notes. It wasn't the same instruments. It wasn't the same rhythm patterns. And it was all designed for a purpose. It was certainly not entertainment. We think of music as just for fun, but it's only really been fun about 300 years ago. It's always been controlled by governments. And the first time it really broke free was in the Renaissance, because prior to the Renaissance, it was either the Catholic Church or a king that had the money to afford musicians. So music was to praise the king, or to used God remind me to get back to a point on the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church would also use music. They would use different things to try to make people more contemplative or peaceful or so forth in the Gregorian chants. And so in the Renaissance, when, Mozart and Chopin, it's the first time ever that they're able to have the public pay money to come see them. So the public is getting to choose the music. And we also got rid of the natural tuning scales. We changed our tuning system at that time to equal temperament, which closes us off from different channels to God, if you will. And it became a popular venue, and that's when we thought of music as entertainment. And we lost the knowledge, actually probably through the Middle Ages, of the power of music. We needed the Dark Ages, or else people probably wouldn't have been as bold to try the different music styles, because people believed that if you played the wrong music, you could harm people's characters, or you could cause disharmony by using music without proper knowledge. And anyway, I just became very fascinated with that, with the whole concept of music, and then I, of course, use my techniques and my own stuff. So, anything else?
Catholic Church, you were going to say something about the Catholic Church.
Oh, thank you, the Catholic Church. What's really interesting, remember I told you about the Royal Rife, he comes up with the frequencies, and they've got huge books of frequencies, and they're to cure diseases, they're to cure bad things. And it's I told before, as we put the notes on a circular scale, he's coming up with, like if he comes up and finds the frequency, let's say of above, he will then he will heal you by giving the complementary color or the inverse proportion of that above. And that is a musical minor sixth away, in music terms. But you don't even need to understand that. Just listen for a moment. In I think it was Pope, one of the popes, Gregory, I'm not sure, they outlawed the musical minor sixth in the Catholic Church. You were simply not allowed to play it. And they called it diabolus tone was the tone of the devil. And that's the tone that would cure us of many varieties of many ills. The other thing is the ancient Solfeggio scale, which is in my Paint Your Soul CD. Very, very healing. It's been used throughout the ages. Certain tones were just wired for them. And they took that off the market. There was many scales, but they kept that for their high masses and their important events for healing. I believe, I don't know for sure, my suspicion is that during the Middle Ages, when people were dying of the plague, they were kind of worried about how potent they were, and they kept the good healing stuff for themselves. So, like when the Pope John died, they had these funny-looking guys with these big sticks, and it had these cross sticks and had all these little bells. That would have been the Solfeggio scale. So they used the healing, and they would disperse it, but they used it themselves, and they kind of didn't allow the rest of the public to have it. So they could be the healer. Okay, anything else? Thank you for coming. Oh, yeah, I have a card. And if anybody got the card,